Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Transcendent Birth session. Actually, that's wrong. Transcendent Rebirth session. This is an oolong tea, and you know that we've been talking over the last couple months about a lot of cliff teas. You also know that usually I start out with a little science, start out with stories and anecdotes of the shop. So we'll start with that. And it's going to be a little shorter on science today and more on culture and stories and information about the region, because this region is very interesting in terms of Chinese history. And if you haven't looked in your email yet, you should have received from me this morning a map. And that map will help place you within Canton province for Chaozhou and Shantou. So those are the two places that we're really talking about. We're really talking about more Chaozhou than Shantou, but both places are illustrated and you get a sense of where they are within Canton province. So let's first talk about stories of the shop this week. We have a customer, and bless her heart, she is a great tea drinker, truly a great tea drinker. She's relatively new to the shop and comes in, and she was born in China. And so we have a little disconnect sometimes because friends send her tea and she looks at it and thinks, oh, this is the greatest, and then brings it in the shop and wants us to serve it to her and the friends she brings in. We don't do that, but we can tell by looking at what she's bringing in, it's not what she thinks it is. And so this is interesting because we had that this week. And she ordered white tea and said, this is so much different than where the white tea I get usually comes from. And so that's always a caution. That's like a yellow flashing light for us to ask more questions and figure out, okay, what are we talking about here? And it turns out she drinks white tea from Anhui province. I'm sure all of you are excited to hear about white tea from Anhui province. Oh, except the home of white tea is not Anhui province. And actually, to the best of my knowledge, there is no white tea grown in Anhui province. But because I haven't been to every single farm, that's not the truth. That's a guess. It could be the truth, but it's a guess. The point being is she thought that she was getting white tea from the original source, and the answer is no. White tea from the original source comes from Fujian province, and it really comes from three counties. It comes from Zhenghe, Fuding, and Jinyang. Those are really the three counties that they're original sources. All right, so enough stories and anecdotes about the shop. Let's talk about anecdotes about Chaozhou and Shantou and Jieyang. Now, I'm introducing the name Jieyang for the first time, but it's also on that map. And it's three separate areas within 50 miles, or actually 20 miles of each other. And the Chinese government at one time, and they probably still have this thought, are hoping all three of them at some time in the future hook up, become one gigantic city, and that area will be referred to as whatever they choose for that. But currently, it really is still three separate cities. You land in Jieyang, and then you take a taxi into wherever you're going. If you're going to Shantou, you take a taxi there. If you're going to Chaozhou, you take a taxi there. So in 2017, when we landed in Jieyang, and we've been to Chaozhou many times, we got out of the taxi. We know what the rate is supposed to be, roughly, between Jieyang and Chaozhou. And it should be about 90 yuan. So it should be about $15, $16. Of course, we've talked about the advantages of my face. Now, as it turns out, there can be some disadvantages too. The advantages is old friend. An old friend gets treated with highest respect and you get the best tea. And occasionally you get secret shipments of tea. Oh, that's great to be an old friend with this face. It is horrible to have this face when you get into a taxi because almost all the places, Beijing is a little bit of an exception, but all the other cities in China, you get in, you open your mouth. Opening your mouth is the first issue because even though I have something that I call Chinese, when Chinese people hear it, oh, horrors. I'm going to have to work through this badly accented, tonally deaf foreigner, and they'll pretend not to understand. Or even worse, your Chinese is outstanding. So when they start off that way, you know two things are going to happen. The first has already happened as soon as you hear that compliment. I must have said that really poorly because they're praising me so highly. Secondly, you also know they're thinking, see, I just saw this face. And usually it costs so much to go to where he's asking to go. You know what? Let's put a facial tax on this fare. And instead of 90 yuan, let's say 400 yuan. So the female taxi driver in a nanosecond grasps the situation, 400 yuan. And Xiaobei was with me. Didn't say anything right away. She just asked her to repeat it, which she did. We got in the taxi. And then they started having a friendly conversation in the front seat. Oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from this place. Where's he from? And, he's from this other place. Okay. And Xiaobei then says to this lady in Chinese, we're going to meet the mayor in Chaozhou, and he's going to interview the guy who's in the back. You could see right away that the lady was making some calculations. Her previous math was obviously wrong. And so she said, oh, well, in that case, I'll take you for free. So we didn't take advantage of that. We paid her 100 yuan and thanked her profusely. And so there's always prices, good prices when it's an old friend, bad prices when, your Chinese is bad. So this is part and parcel of traveling around in China. If you're not connected and if you don't understand how to interact, it can easily get more expensive than it really should be. So at any rate, Chaozhou is the area where the so-called Phoenix teas come from. But that's not the only teas. Those are not the only teas that come from this area. And historically, in the records, so for example, there's a set of tea records in Britain which shows that between 1836 and 1840, they were getting tea from Wui Mountains and Fujian, and then they were getting Guangdong Wui and a bunch of other teas. Now, listen to what I just said, Guangdong Wui. There is no such thing as Guangdong Wui. But what they meant was that it was in the Wui style. And indeed, transcendent rebirth is in the Wui style. And we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the development and history. But I know that on this beautiful day, everybody has gotten up with a little sense of thirst. And therefore, let's, for a change, get to the tea early and then have the discussions about the history and culture, because there's a lot of exciting things to talk about this area. So it is my great pleasure to have the tea master come on up and brew first as a demonstration and then to brew together with you. And you should either be brewing with ceramic or an I Ching teapot. And I apologize to those who bought the new I Ching teapots. I forgot, after talking so proudly that I remembered the last few weeks, to include the amount of grams for your pot, because it's less than what it is on the website. I forgot to do it. So this will be a 4 gram for you. The rest of you, yours is pre-measured as 5 grams. So without further ado, let me bring in the thirsty tea master.
There's
Thirsty.
okay, there's okay.
你好，小北。
Hey, hello, Aaron. So today now we do Chaozhou tea, It's called, the 功夫茶 in Chaozhou. So okay, we do same together, same section. Look at that, Everybody you can watch it. Simple, easy. Okay. So oolong
So it's brewed at 200 degrees, and you're best off to do it in an I Ching teapot, clay teapot. You'll get the best ultimate flavor. You'll get an okay flavor in a ceramic, but the timings are different, and the absolute best flavor will end up in the I Ching teapot.
5 grams or 6 grams, and which in ice, this is from Jeremy, so I don't know which kind of pot, but that's the question, grammage.
So for yours, Jeremy, yours is already pre-measured as 5 grams.
The email apparently says 6 grams.
The email says 6 grams. Well, that shows that we have an errant.
ceramic is clay.
Yeah, but
So,
that
yeah.
means that the horrible 2 words, understudy error, have to come out. So apparently I wrote that or forgot to change it or did something wrong with that. It's actually 5 grams and 4 grams for those of you who have the new pots. All right, so you heat the cup up. And if you're using an I Ching pot, you pour the water over it, you pour the water in it. And the reason being is that oolong teas in general need more heat. And that's because of how they're processed. And that's because the essential oils, or not oils, but the essential volatiles from inside the leaf are baked on the outside. And in order for you to get the full appreciation, you need them done at a hotter temperature. And it must be covered. All right, so the tea master is getting the tea, putting it in the pot. And as usual, is going to shake it up. What's the purpose again of shaking up? It's really to distribute heat to all the leaves. If you can do that, what happens is the leaves are starting to extrude aroma, and they're getting ready to actually receive the heated water, and you again get the best combination of aroma and flavor when you do that. Remembering again that this is a 200-degree brew. And you don't have to do dissipation of the water, dissipation of steam, or any of that with this. Hotter is better, but not hotter than the 200 degrees. So we set the timer. Timer is 2 minutes. And let's talk a little bit more about Chaozhou. Chaozhou is really home of beautiful ceramics that are designed for small cup tea. And the Kung Fu style of tea really originated in Chaozhou. So they have a saying that the Wui Mountains produces the tea, the Chaozhou area actually brews the tea. And this is to typify where the expertise in each area is. Obviously, the processing of the tea from the Wui Mountains, that's unmatched. The brewing, especially for small cups, small pot, is for the Chaozhou Shantou area. That's where that originated. And yet, you note, so there's some things I want you to note. In the map that I sent, you see that Chaozhou and Shantou are clearly in Canton province. And yet the influence in both of those areas, both in terms of food, in terms of language, in terms of general culture, comes from Fujian province in those two areas. And there is a real reason for this. During the Song dynasty, so in the 1100s, 1200s, they assigned officials from southern Fujian province to actually be the leaders in these areas. So the natural language of communication in those areas is very close to southern Fujian language. Minnan. Okay. Time is up. Tea Master is pouring. So there's several things to note. She's not in a hurry. She's deliberate. She's not trying to make a bunch of bubbles. In fact, I hardly see any bubbles at all. And so one of the things you want to look at is the color. And she's going to show you the color here. So this is a very beautiful amber with a tinge of red in it. Just a beautiful, beautiful color. And if you could smell what I smell, you would probably also say something like a beautiful aroma. I'm not going to tell you what that aroma is, because that aroma is a key to the teas that come from Chaozhou and the surrounding areas. So the first thing you do, you remember, this is done at 200 degrees. 200 degrees is way, way, way too hot to take anything aside from a small inhalation. And that's what you do. You take a small inhalation of the tea and you let it kind of touch the sides of your mouth, because we're going to start off again focusing on the quality of the tea. And so we're going to make some evaluations about mouthfeel. We're going to make evaluations about dryness. We're going to get a sense of aftertaste. And then as we go through the cup, we'll get a sense of energetics. And all of these qualities are appreciated differently by all of you, especially the energetics, because all of us are genomically different. And therefore, we're going to appreciate this slightly differently. All right, so first getting a sense of the aroma. And now I'm going to take that inhalation. It's a 200-degree inhalation. Roll it around in my mouth. I'm trying to get a sense of where the dryness is. Okay, I'm getting a little aftertaste here. Too early for energetics. Let's try another inhalation. Okay, I think I have a good starting idea of what this is. And remembering that this is an oolong tea in the cliff tea style, you will see some of the characteristics of cliff tea, but there's also definite characteristics, and there are some differences in how this is processed. So you're going to brew now. We'll continue to go through some of these items as you're brewing. Remembering, of course, make sure that whatever you brew with, whether it's ceramic, whether it's clay, it's completely clean. Everything is cleaned out, no leaves. And you see on the top here, we have some leaves left in, so we make sure that those are gone. And the realization that it's got to be clean every time is really important, because when it's clean every time like that, what happens is you're going to get the purest taste. And then when you evaluate and other people evaluate, you'll be playing with the same deck, so to speak. So the tea master has ascertained that the pot is empty. So she reminds everybody that the movements should not be jerky. We're not in a hurry. It's slow and deliberate. And actually, I probably said that backwards. It's deliberate and slow. In other words, you understand why each of the motions is being made. That's the deliberate part. So you open your baggie and put it in the teapot. You shake the leaves. You smell. Why in the world do you smell? For a couple reasons. You smell because, oops, what if I picked up the wrong leaves and dropped them in there? Well, you know your tea, and you, oh, wait a minute, something else got in the pot. That's one reason. Second reason, the level of aroma tells you, yeah, I got this heated up properly, and I've got most of the leaves already starting to be heated up.
Warm, dry leaves smell like sweet cherries and fruit and chocolate.
Sweet cherries with fruit and chocolate. All the things I love, and therefore I must love this tea. And the answer to that question will be yes, I do love this tea. Great comment. Great comment.
The warm, dry leaves give a bomb of aromatics. It reminds me of a berry of some kind. I'm not sure which, maybe fresh cranberry.
A bomb of aromatics, reminding of a berry of some sort, a non-specific berry. And that's fine. That's great, because it actually has that quality. All right, while you're thinking about more things, let's go through whether this tea was famous or not until recently. So the answer is tea from this area. Which area am I talking about? The Phoenix Mountains, particularly the area where we get this, which is Wudong, extremely famous. They used to do, in fact, the whole area, Raoping, there's a bunch of little areas there. used to produce tribute tea. So the tribute tea was already going to the emperor at least by the Ming Dynasty, probably a little bit before that. In fact, I'm sure before that, because a Sung Dynasty emperor had visited that area, was thirsty, was given tea, loved the tea, and said, where's my tea at home? You know, why aren't I getting my tea every year at home? Why do I have to come to you? Tea's supposed to come to me. So that's, it gives you some background that this tea didn't just all of a sudden become famous. It's been famous for a while. However, the processing modality changed, didn't it? So sometime in either the late Ming Dynasty or early Qing Dynasty, they started doing it in the Wui style. And so they really started making something close to cliff teas. All right, timer has gone off unless you're using ceramics, in which case you've added a minute more.
Somebody else gets a sense of honey from the dry leaves.
Sense of honey from the dry leaves. All right, everybody's saying the same thing. These darn dry leaves, they got some sweetness in it. They got some fruitiness in it. And we're all using slightly different words, but the feeling is exactly the same. Yes.
Another concurrence on a sense of chocolatiness as well.
That underlying hint of chocolatiness. And why does that happen in tea leaves? It happens for a couple reasons. First off, it is related to varietal. Second off, it's related to processing. So the processing, when you oxidize enough, you start to bring out in some varietals these distinct hints of chocolate, but you're getting the overlord hints, which is the berries, the fruit, the sweetness. Somebody's going to say the other thing in a minute. Yes.
Aftertaste is long lasting, super juicy to sweet. It's the roof of the mouth and the back of the tongue.
Aftertaste is long lasting, super juicy and sweet. Roof of mouth, wonderful comment, on the money. So you can tell that there's something missing here compared to cliff teas. What is it that's missing? So think about where I placed you, and then it should come to you right away.
The minerality is different.
Perfect. So the minerality is extremely different. You really don't get that volcanic driven minerality that you get from the Wui Mountains, because these are not those mountains. And the pH of the soil is different. The whole sensibility, when you go out and look at the soil, it's different. And therefore, you're going to get a different result.
Back to the dry leaves for a moment. Somebody noted that her first take was a vegetal aroma before the fruit. And then it made her think of stewed vegetables, no onions, but like the sweetness more vegetable.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I like this comment a lot because there's subtlety to it. So this individual, this commentator talks about still sweetness, but it's a sweetness of vegetality, of vegetal that comes from stew. And when you have a really sweet set of tomatoes or bell peppers in a stew, you do get that sense of vegetalness with a hint of sweetness. And this has that underlying, there is this underlying combination. And yet it's subtle. It's very subtle. All of you have captured the very obvious stuff. Honey, fruit, berry, sweet, and we've heard sweet over and over again. And absolutely, so while you're continuing to think, let me tell you a little bit of the history of the process in this area. So the process was similar to the wheat process insofar as they pick the leaves, they pick them in spring. Where these come from is high mountain being defined in this case. Let me give you real numbers. 1448, it's about 5,000 feet above sea level, a little less than that, maybe 4,600 to 5,000 feet above sea level. This place is pristine. It's gated like so many of the other great places, and there's a bridge you got to cross. And at that bridge, there's a police station. And if you don't have business up there, you don't get in. And just like the other premium tea areas, they're trying to prevent hooliganism, theft. The hooliganism, let me back that up. Really, it's more the theft that they're trying to prevent, because you really don't have that type of hooliganism in China, but you do have theft and a lot of it. So yes, you pick, you bring in, and you saw in the pictures, they use their roofs. They've got all these places, and these are both combination. In some cases, they're processing places only, but for the most part, they're processing and live-in spaces, although most of the living in that's going on there is only during the season. The real live-in places are at the base of the mountain, and those are the real houses. Those places you can entertain, you can sit with people, you have sales rooms in those places, and you have beds for the workers who are working day in, 12-hour days. Yes.
Another experiential comment here. Somebody caught a whiff of sweetness and freshness of wild spring flowers.
Good. I was waiting for this. A whiff of sweetness and freshness of wild spring flowers. I was truly waiting for this, because in China, they talk about all the things that you've said, but they don't lead with those. They lead with the floral. Now, why am I not concerned with how we led? Because it's the tomato issue. You have the floral and the fruity are so close together in terms of detection of aroma and taste that if you say one, in my mind, it's equal to saying the other. But I'm glad that somebody did come to that floral. Yes.
Taking this slowly, my initial sips are dry on the front of my tongue.
Initial sips are dry in the front of the tongue. This individual commentator is taking this slowly. That's great.
Flavor is divine, very smooth, sweet, rich, and complex.
Flavor, smooth, sweet, rich, and complex. It's divine. And it is. It is complex, and it's complex in a different way than the cliff tea complex. The cliff tea complex is usually complexity all the way through the glass, changeability. This is complexity of flavor right out of the get-go. As soon as you taste it, there's no interference from a couple things. You don't have that type of minerality piercing the flavor in this tea. It's not there. You also don't have roast dominating as it does in some cliff teas. The Phoenix teas, where can they get hard to drink? I will tell you, when they're first harvested, if you drink those within the first 3 to 6 months, they are edgy, extremely edgy. When we first got Transcendent Rebirth in the shop, I realized, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to serve this to most customers. I'm going to have to wait. We knew it was great, but we also knew, by edgy here, I mean the astringency was so strong when we initially got it that, yeah, we could taste down to all the things you're tasting obviously now, but we knew, oh, you know what? We got to let this astringency wear off. And after 3 months, it did wear off, and it became this really, really pleasant, really, really delicious cliff tea. It's not a cliff tea, Phoenix tea.
Somebody else detected the florality more strongly in the scent of the warm leaves, and somebody else comments it's just love at first smell.
Love its first smell, and another commentator, they detected the florality or the floralness of the wet leaves. And both of those things are great comments. So the Phoenix teas from the Chinese perspective are almost always classified by what floralness they are. Now, I'm not good enough to do that because I don't know that there's 18 or 20 flowers that they use as kind of the baseline. And because I don't live in that area and therefore don't experience that type of floralness, when you ask me to use that with these teas, I can't do it because I can't bring up, there's many varietals of orchids, and they attach those names to the various Phoenix teas that are made. And there's a huge range of them. There's about 20. Yeah.
The tea liquor continues to give off the aroma of leaves.
The tea liquor gives off the aroma of leaves. Yes, this is a nice match. And again, it's so different from the cliff teas because the cliff teas, many times in the aroma stage, you get roast, you get caramel, sometimes you get a little chocolate, but the underlying whatever else is there, sometimes and quite frequently is covered up until you get it into tea liquor. And then you start, oh, there is this other thing. Why didn't I smell that? Well, you didn't smell it because it was covered up by the roast. Whereas here, they're not roasting this in the same way. And in a few minutes, I'll get to that point because as I was going through the process, one of the main differences is how they do handle roast. Yeah, this is really smooth. This is really smooth. All right. Keep your comments coming, but I'm going to go ahead with the process. So pick, you saw that they wither on top of the roofs of many of those places. You saw that some of those places have elevators, but some do not. So when you go to Wudong, the overlying impression is, oh my God, these guys, they must be being starved. There are no fat pickers in Wudong. In fact, the workers there, they're all rail thin. Well, duh, because they're climbing these stairways up and down. I mean, it's really hard work. And they stay in these areas and they live in these temporary, they're not temporary, but in the places they're built there. They're really, again, they're dormitories as well as processing places. And one of the reasons you have to be close to the tea is what if all of a sudden fog runs in and you've got tea on the roof, or it starts to sprinkle and you've got tea here in processing. You just really have to be there to take care of business right away. It's much like if a freeze comes to a vineyard, you got to be there because otherwise you're going to lose your crop or your plants. So they built this all on these mountains. They're using them to wither, usually on the roof. Then they do a little bit of indoor withering, and then they actually bruise the leaves, let them oxidize for some period of time, fry them, and they fry very hot for a short amount of time. They take it out, they roll it, and then they let it rest briefly. Briefly, when it's resting, the leaves will sometimes seem as if they're coming back to life again. They then refry and re-roll. Lastly, in the old days, so what do I mean by old days? And with China, you always have to talk about that because old in China can be very old, whereas old here, not so old. So in the 1900s, there are plenty of descriptions where instead of roasting as a final step, they actually refried again, and that was it. They let it rest after refrying, sorted through, just like they always sort through, and then put it on market. So right away, we see that there's something quite distinct about this. They are making it in the Wu style in terms of they're making the long strips, and they're rolling them such that they look like little rolled dragons. And these days, they're roasting, but they're only roasting once. This isn't this process where it takes 3 months or 4 months or longer to come to a final product. Oh no. In a full 2 or 3 days, all done. All done. Now, all done doesn't mean you can drink it because it is potent and edgy and hard. So again, it has to rest. If for some reason at the end of a month it's not tasting right, you can always apply more heat, and occasionally they'll do that. But the best of the tea masters gets it right out of the get-go. Yeah.
A few more tasting flavor observations.
Yeah.
One is now that the tea is cooled some, the taster can coat his tongue with the tea and gets a sense that there ought to be certain flavors there, but they're not actually there, almost as if his initial perception was off and the actual flavor delivered is different, so more elusive in that sense.
So elusive in the sense that the initial inhalation, the initial aromas suggested certain flavors, but as it cooled down and you actually get a chance to drink it and cool the tongue, the perception of the flavors is different. And so I did say that there is complexity right from the beginning. There is some elusiveness and changeability to this, but again, not at the level in terms of the changeability of many of the cliff teas.
The astringency remains on the front, the swallow is very smooth.
Astringency remains on the front, the swallow is very smooth. And I absolutely get that astringency on the middle to the front. And it's still in my mouth, very strong, and it is very smooth. And almost, even in spite of that astringency, the astringency is an afterthought to the mellowness and softness of this tea, which is interesting because you don't usually use all those words in the same sentence, but with this you do. And you do particularly as it ages a little bit, because again, in the beginning, this would have been so astringent, you would have forgotten to note, oh, wait a minute. By the very end, it's nice and mellow and smooth. The mellow and smooth has now come to the fore.
Second steep time again?
Second steep is 1 minute if you're using a clay pot, and it's 2 minutes if you're using ceramic.
Halfway down, the tea seems thicker on the middle part of my tongue, and I get a light butter flavor in the background.
So halfway down, it seems thicker on the tongue with a hint of butteriness. And the butteriness here, I think, is more a description of mouthfeel. So a creaminess, I definitely get that creaminess. It's not so much it tastes buttery, but it is buttery in your mouth. And there's a distinction there. And I think that this commentator has probably really detected that distinction. And I certainly get that.
Somebody else notes the beauty of the tea liquor, like a rosy wine to her, and that energetically, that she feels an energy of serene beauty and calmness from it.
Energetically serene beauty and calmingness in this tea for this commentator. What was the first part? I'm sorry.
Just the beautiful.
A beautiful rosy color. Yes, this tea is beautiful on so many different levels. And I'm really glad you picked that up about energetics. There's not only a calmingness to this, there's another element of this. I'm not going to say it because one of you is going to say this, but there's plenty of energetics which it takes a little bit of time to get. And that's why you can't be in a rush about energetics. Energetics come when they come. And all of us, as our bodies process this, we get that, oh, wow, yes.
Someone else says potent, edgy, hard, question mark. This is what's coming through.
Potent, no question. The edginess has worn off. I mean, if you think this is edgy, I got plenty of other, that are rested only a short amount of time. And that would show you a huge edginess. So I don't like to use the word edgy unless it's too much. To me, this has retreated from too much, and it's retreated a lot. Yeah.
Is it true this region is known for spicy food?
Is it true that this region is known for spicy food? No, I'm glad you asked that question because this region is known for several different things. One, the seafood, especially the oysters, are out of this world. Two, beef balls. Now, the beef balls are really interesting because when they're made properly, and it's very famous, you take one of these, you bounce it, it's just as if it were made of rubber. And whatever they're putting in that, whatever vegetables they're putting in that, it's unbelievable. And actually, that was one of the very first meals because I'd heard of these for a long time that I ever had there. The other thing is the comment was about spiciness, right? If the commentator means, I may have misread what you are trying to indicate, because if you mean spiciness in terms of heat, the answer is no. But if you mean spiciness in subtle varieties, oh, the answer is real yes, because they make a duck down there. You know, Beijing is famous for Beijing stuff. But I will tell you, Chaozhou duck is out of this world. And we've had it at people's houses, fully spiced. And again, I'm using spice, zero heat, but just flavorful, just from the local spices that they're using. So from that perspective, yes. So lots of seafood, lots of oysters. These beef balls are very famous. The duck is very famous. The food in Chaozhou is really, really good. And it's different. It's absolutely different from Canton. Remember what I said here at the opening. Chaozhou Shantou are more closely aligned to southern Fujian than they really are to Canton province, or Canton city, and actually the province itself. The language is so much closer to Fujian, southern Fujian, and that the appreciation of the seafood is much like the way Southern Fujianese appreciate. And their appreciation of tea in some ways also is closer to the Fujian appreciation because they're not drinking, by and large, the fermented teas. You go to Canton, everybody drinks fermented tea. Here, no, they're drinking this. Occasionally, they'll have a cliff tea. So it's a whole different cultural milieu. Also, from a cultural standpoint, most people in Chaozhou and Shantou belong to two classes. You had a strong, big class of fishermen. The fishermen moved out and went all over Southeast Asia, continuing to be fishermen. You also had this huge merchant class. So very successful, again, throughout Southeast Asia in running enterprises. So you've got a different cultural starting point. So in Canton City, in the surrounding areas, what's the base in those areas? It's agriculture. So you have more peasants. It's not the merchant base that Chaozhou is. Very, very famous for their merchants and very famous for their crafts, their pots. This is a Chaozhou pot. This thing is different than the Yixing pot. It's red clay. Their clay is different, but it's equally potent in terms of a nice effect. And these pots are thrown differently. The bottom part is one piece, whereas in the Yixing pots, it's 3 or 4 pieces. So it's very different. These things, they don't make many of these every year. They make, the artisans, when they're doing the good pots, are making 2 or 3 of them a year. And so hence, when you buy one of these things, there's a huge premium to them.
A couple more on energetics.
Yeah.
For one person, this just makes them slow down and go deeper with his perceptions. It feels like it could be, it cures the apparent acceleration of time during the pandemic. For somebody else, as it cools down, she's getting an aftertaste of almost something citrusy, citrus.
I can accept both of those comments. The first comment is about causing you to slow down, because when you get a tea like this, it's so good and interesting, and it does have gradations as it cools down, that it's like, wow, this is good. And then the next taste, oh, not only is this good, it's a little different, it's better. And it does have that slow down effect. And we like this one a lot for that reason. The second comment again, I'm sorry.
The other comment was about, well, that is about the peel, about citrus.
Citrusy,
flavor,
yes.
As it cools down.
I like the citrus comment, and I like it because this has everything is danced around it. The fragrance, the honey-like, the berry, so there's a little tartness in there. So yes, you can imagine almost a very mild Meyer lemon. That's the type of citrusiness, bordering, by the way, on a very mild tangerine. It's that type of citrusness that I also detect in this.
And this person's getting a liminess, but still citrus.
Liminess, okay, and I can accept that. You know why? Because if the lime is a full lime and it's not real tart and puckery, you have those limes that are really, really delicious and full of flavor. And that is what I'm getting from this. And when you say citrus, it's the full of flavor, not the tartness, not the puckeriness of citrus, but the full of interesting flavor. This actually, and again, as I'm thinking about it a little bit, it has a slight hint to me of the red pomelos. And again, that type of citrus, which has just that slightest hint of sweetness, and again, leaves no sense of, ooh, that was too much type of feeling.
Really excellent, relaxing total body feel after the first moment.
Relaxing total body feel. And I love this comment because you all are hitting high notes. So a groundedness, a calmingness, a relaxing nature to this, a slowing down. All of these things are true. You cannot, for reasons that are different than the Wui Cliff Teas, you cannot rush through this. If you rush through it, it doesn't really allow you to rush through it because, again, the interestingness of the flavor. Yeah.
In thinking about energetics, commentator says she thinks about which part of her body seems to react to the tea. For this one, it was my forehead, my brain, as opposed to last week, it was my belly. My brain got stimulated today, and now it's calming me down and letting me appreciate the tea.
Forehead and brain stimulation versus last week when we had Emerald Gates, a belly calming. And I get this. Every tea has its specific energetics. And if we made a generalization, that would be wrong for two reasons. First off, we all handle things individually a little bit differently. So our appreciation of things is a little different. And the other aspect is every tea has a different type of stimulation because actually, and I told you we weren't going to do science today. So the stuff that follows, pretend that I just didn't say this today. The actual chemical components of each of the tea bushes or trees are different. And what I mean by that is, so there's a varietal that grows in the Phoenix Mountains that has a much greater amount of polyphenols in it than this does. And so therefore, of course, the feeling of that is going to be different. So the adjustments in amino acids and polyphenols, in the aromatics, in the volatiles, all of that is going to be different by varietal, it's going to be different by area, and it's going to be different by location on the mountain. We went to a farm that was growing not this, but another varietal. And the other varietal, he had 4 different patches on this mountain. And it's a beautiful area. And he was actually growing some citrus fruit also in this same area, where the varietals are slightly different. And therefore, the flavors and the effects on you are going to be different. And so why are Chinese scientists really, and agricultural specialists really homing in on this stuff right now? They didn't know before. They knew because the priests knew and the tea literati knew that, oh, have this one because this one is going to make you feel a certain way, or have that one. Oh, you need this feeling. Well, have this one over here. They knew these things, but they knew them not from a Western sense of knowing them. You know, we sit down in the lab, you know, X amount of this compound, X amount of that compound. No, they knew it experientially. Now, Chinese scientists are really homing in on the chemical compositions. And again, most of these sessions, if you were all chemists, you would love my presentations because I present all of this stuff. But remembering we're not all chemists and my enthusiasm for science isn't shared at the same degree by all of you. I understand that. But my enthusiasm for taste is shared. And by the way, most of yours probably even exceed mine. So that's why we center on the taste. But there is science behind this. And so the differences in energetics are not an accident.
Bush or tree?
This particular one is in between. So it's not a tree in the way you would normally understand it. So this particular one is about 7 feet tall. The leaves are medium size. It's old though. And the stuff from Wudong is invariably old. And one of the reasons this is not a tree is because they prune this, and they prune it actively. And the reason they prune actively is because, unlike Yunnan, where you get the ladders, you climb up the various trees, you go from tree to tree. I mean, that's their style of dealing with tea. In this area, their style is, hey, let's get these things within step ladder distance. So they all carry their step ladders. They get up on these things. These hills are ridiculous. I wouldn't be surprised if they have frequent accidents because they're so steep. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. You look down into a canyon from this area. It's a 1-lane road, essentially. They do have some turnouts. And that's another reason you just can't have people wandering up there, because there's really no good place to turn around. Usually you have to go some distance before you can either find a turnout or a turnaround location. And the steepness of the road. Imagine the steepest driveways you're aware of, and that would be what this road is like in many places.
Food pairing?
Food pairing. Now that's an interesting question, because I would actually serve this after I served a white fish. So, and I would serve it between a white fish and bringing out. So remember, I do cooking in a way perhaps that, a little non-standard. So when I'm doing courses, sometimes I rearrange the normal way you might do courses. So I might start somebody with a salad, have a nice white fish, something like a halibut, and then afterwards have a rest period, because my intention would be to have 4 or 5 courses, at the end a nice dessert. Well, I'd have this in between the fish and the next course, and my next course would be a very nice set of asparagus. So this here, you didn't know, by the way, that you were going to get such a precise food pairing. So this is one type of pairing that I would have. Generally speaking, because this doesn't have that penetration quality that some teas have, if you're going to do it as a dessert tea, then truly make it dessert first and then tea to finish off it. Make this a separate course at the very end. So if you had as a dessert, say an icy of some sort with some fruit in it, and nice warm day, you finish that, 30 minutes later, you roll this out. This is a wonderful way as a digestive to help you get through the meal that way, and also to be interesting from a flavor perspective and something that wraps up a wonderful meal. So that's how I handle this.
Am I looking at trichomes in my mug?
So this questioner asked whether they're looking at trichomes. Oh, you mean at the very bottom? Yes, you are at the very bottom. You're not looking to them at them floating around. At least not in my mug. They don't float around. They're at the very bottom. All right. Oh my gosh. This did not today feel like I was over talking. I actually thought I had about a half hour more. And in my head, I have about a half hour more of material about this area. I think suffice it to say that this is an insular, very separated area versus some other parts of China. And that the language and the customs here are also very particular. So if you're not from this area or from southern Fujian, sometimes it's really hard to really get hooked into the culture, but it's worthwhile to make the try because the people are wonderful. Every home has one of these trays or something like it. They all have the covered bowls, the gaiwar. Most of them also have the traditional pots. They have some wonderful tea sets there. And every home you go to, first thing, when you go in the home, they roll out the tea. Have to have tea. And they have specific rules. The rules here of doing gongfu tea are very, very specific. And a violation of these rules is seen as, oh, you're an outsider versus you're an insider. The other thing, and then we'll wrap up, is this area traditionally always has had tea. In other words, that's been the drink of the common person. It's been the drink of the merchants. It's been the drink of the fishermen. Tea has been the key drink. And there have been periods in Chinese recent history where tea wasn't easily available. But starting after about 1984, 1985, when tea became more available, people were really happy that they could go and purchase tea in large quantities so that the household could have it, because it really is part and parcel of the language, the social fabric, and the social language of interaction in Chaozhou and Shantou.
And you said it's Kung Fu style?
It's Kung Fu style, yes. That's what they do there. They would be generally horrified to do the large cup. Although we know several people from that area who have now come to accept the large cup, but the sensibility, here's the reason why they'd be horrified. They'd be horrified because this doesn't, when they first look at it, suggest the social lining or the cultural interactions that are so important in this area. This is a base of the culture in this area. Unlike other areas, some other areas in China where you go, yeah, they'll roll out the tea, but there isn't as much ceremony. And I find that here, it's just seen as bad manners. Whereas in other areas, it's, well, they didn't do it, but it's not bad manners. So there is a very distinct difference. This is a wonderful place to visit. When you get close to the people in this place, it is amazing. They will do anything for you, and it's really, really interesting. But getting close, just like anywhere else in China, takes time. And you have to learn the set of social rules that get you connected. All right. Next week, we're starting a new series. So that's a February 5th. No, that's wrong. That's a February 12th, since today is February 5th. And we're going to do Radiance. Ooh, that's a brand new red tea. So Radiance will be next week. And then the other two, it slipped my mind what they are, but that's all right. You know that they're going to be good. Look forward to seeing all of those of you who can make it next week. Continue to look at the website, because we now are going to have another landing page for the virtual tea tastings. We are going to have a customer playground page. All of these things that we're working on, we haven't stopped working on it. It just takes a little time to get them done correctly and posted. So at any rate, we really appreciate, there have been some brilliant customer tasting notes written. We really appreciate those. This has been great. And if we can get some reviews about the tea tastings themselves, we'd appreciate that. And you can send those directly to me until we get the page up. So what is your assignment this week? Your assignment this week is to stay healthy, drink lots of tea, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.